Hello and welcome to episode 2 of Shooting the Breeze, the formal podcast of WaltonPA.com. I am Walt White, obviously of WaltonPA.com, and I'm here to cover episode 2. If you watched episode 1, I want to thank you for spending the 50 minutes or so sitting in front of your computer or in front of your iPod or however you decided to digest that particular episode, and I want to thank you for investing that time in my blog. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of feedback via direct messages on Twitter, some Facebook messages, and a couple of people just sort of passing by that mentioned some things about the blog, and I really appreciate the constructive criticism, the kind words, and the comments that I got on my personal blog. I would love, it's not so much a personal blog anymore since it's geared more towards firearms than anything else. However, I really do appreciate everyone that took the time to leave a comment. That really made my day, and I look forward to seeing your response on this episode so that I can reply to it and maybe we can have some back and forth discussion. So with all the pleasantries out of the way, I thought I would jump right into the news and get this podcast underway. So first things first, I was reading over my Google Reader. It's my preferred RSS reader, and I have a feed set up specifically to produce gun-related content for this blog. I call it podcast news feed or something similar. News sources for podcasts. And basically in there, I have a couple of RSS feeds set up to scour the internet and produce topics that relate to self-defense and firearms. And sometimes it kicks back really interesting results. Sometimes it's really horrible results that really don't. They mention the smoking gun and things like this, but they really have nothing to do with firearms. So I have a lot of stuff to wade through. However, there's some really interesting stuff that comes up from time to time. And the first one that really caught my eye since the last podcast was this article from the SunSentinel.com. Written by, if I can find where to attribute it to, I'm not seeing the author. However, this article, there it goes, Jerome Birdie from the Sun Sentinel. This was published on August 12th, 2011, and it is entitled "Former Wrestler 63 Takes Down Robber in Boynton Beach." And I thought this was really cool, so I'm going to go ahead and read it to you. So, Boynton Beach. Fred Kemp and his wife had just finished dinner Thursday night. As they walked out of the restaurant, a man came out of the darkness demanding money. But this robber picked the wrong guy. Turns out 63-year-old Fred Kemp is a former wrestler. He and his wife Julie had just eaten at Hurricane Alley in the 500 block of East Ocean Avenue. It was about 9:15 and they were getting into their car, which was parked nearby on the street. Seated on the passenger side, Kemp was closing the door on his 2011 Volkswagen Jetta when the robber, identified as Richard Noling, 41, stuck a gun in his face. Thinking of his wife's safety, the 5'7" Kemp instinctively pushed the gun away. But the robber started to pistol whip Kemp in the head, police said. He started to hit me, so I reacted from there. A bruised but smiling Kemp said Friday. I got him out into the street and held his arm. I foot sweeped him down and I was trying to get a hold of the gun. He banged me up a little, but my main concern was the gun. Pulling out more wrestling moves, Kemp maneuvered the suspect into a rear naked choke hold, or sleeper hold, a popular submission technique in mixed martial arts. When Noling's oxygen began to run out and he became weak, Julie Kemp, 53, grabbed the gun. It turned out to be an authentic-looking pellet gun, and held it pointed at him until police arrived, investigators said. Fred Kemp showed the bad guy no mercy. He asked me to let him go when I had him down, Kemp said. I said no, I'm not going to do that. The police report describes Kemp's response this way. The victim grabbed the gun and wrestled Noling to the ground, disarming him and held him down until police arrived. Noling of Stewart was arrested and charged with robbery and aggravated battery. His criminal history includes drug, theft, and burglary charges, records show. Kemp, a muscular 150 pounds, is a business consultant who lives west of Boynton Beach and started wrestling in high school. The sport won him a scholarship to Hofstra University in Long Island, New York. He coaches wrestling for the New York State Junior Olympic team and is a volunteer assistant wrestling coach at American University in Washington, D.C. The Kemps will celebrate their 12th anniversary next month. In retrospect, he said, "It's not a wise move, but it was my reflexes and I'm fairly comfortable in being able to handle myself, so I did what came natural. I'm happy that no one got hurt and the bad guy is off the street," he said. Joe DeMeo, head coach of the New York State Junior Olympic team, said Kemp's heroics didn't surprise him a bit. "Fred Kemp's the last guy I would rob," DeMeo said. "He'll go down fighting. He does have a lot of physical ability. He's a no-nonsense, get-the-job-done kind of guy." So this article really does it for me. It makes me smile to think that, you know, here's this elderly couple in their 60s getting into their car after dinner, and, you know, the bad guy comes by and sticks a gun in their face. Now, a lot of what the popular belief is that you should give them the money, let them, and see if they'll leave. You know, it's not a really great idea to start fighting a guy with a gun in your face. However, this guy feels very comfortable with his abilities, manages to get this guy into a chokehold and just makes him tap out in the street. That's fantastic. I love hearing stories like this. And it's always nice to hear the good guy not getting hurt. I mean, he got banged up a little bit from being pistol whipped, but the bad guy was choked out. I'm sure he was embarrassed, and he got what he deserved. He's locked up, and I'm sure he's waiting sentencing. I'd be interested to see what happens from there, whether what happens with this guy, how much time he gets for the attempted robbery and things like that. But all in all, a very happy story. The good guy made it out without being hurt too bad, and the bad guy goes to prison. So that is the first bit of news. There's actually some video associated with the news article. However, I haven't read it yet. The next article is one that I don't completely agree with. However, it kind of raised my eyebrows, or raised an eyebrow, and I thought I would pass along and share it with you. This is another article I stumbled onto from my RSS feed. And this is an opinion piece by Nathan Bennett, published August 8th, 2011, on South Texas Outdoors. It is entitled "The Importance of Guns for Self-Defense." Now, this article goes on to say, "There is only one foolproof way to defeat someone who wants to harm you or your loved ones: a gun. People who think that guns are evil and useless are likely to be those who have never been robbed, raped, or beaten. With the crime rate in America headed steadily upward, it is vital that every American have at least one loaded firearm in a secret but convenient place in their home." Recently, a man had to testify in court about the horrible incident where two men broke into his home, raped his wife and daughter, and then killed them in front of him. This terrible crime was not isolated, but was part of an increasing trend in our country. Every day, hundreds of people are victimized simply because they either did not feel they needed to be armed, or because they had a preconceived dislike for guns. With home invasions dramatically on the rise, and it is wise and prudent to arm ourselves against those whose motto is, "If I need it, I'll take it from someone else." No thief is truly afraid of a baseball bat or knife, nor are they concerned that you might yell or scream, because fear is a turn-on for many killers. The more afraid you are, the more violent they get. Only a gun will stop a criminal from attacking you and your family. It is not guns that kill people, it is people who kill people. The fact is, a person should not fear a gun in any way unless they are about to commit a crime in a place where the occupant may have a firearm. If an individual has studied their new firearm, is familiar with its function, and has practiced at least once or twice with it, then total self-defense is a simple matter. A 6'4", 240-pound rapist is no match for a 5'2", 110-pound woman with a loaded gun. Likewise, 4 men breaking into a house are no match for 1 man with a loaded semi-automatic pistol or rifle. It has been said that when guns are taken away from the people, then only criminals will have guns. In our free country, we have the right, in most states, to own and possess a firearm or firearms. To be safe rather than sorry, why not take advantage of this constitutional right and purchase a firearm and ammunition to be completely protected? This way you are completely changing the odds in your favor. If and when that scary moment comes when you hear a sound in your home and you know it's not one of your family, or when your door begins to be bashed in from the outside and there are only a few more seconds before drugged and murderous men come storming into your house. If you are gone and your wife is home alone, would you rather she be armed or unarmed? To be armed is to be secure. Remember, a gun is not the only answer for self-defense, but it is the best answer. Nathan Bennett is a gun counter associate at Johnny's True Value in Harlington. I think this is a very good example of extreme Second Amendment, or extreme kind of gun nut, if you will. Not to say that in any sort of negative context, but here we have a situation where a guy says that, and I quote, "No thief is truly afraid of a baseball bat or knife, nor are they concerned that you might yell or scream, because fear is a turn on to many killers, yada yada yada." Oop, read the wrong paragraph. The paragraph that I meant to highlight was, "The fact is, a person should not fear a gun in any way unless they are about to commit a crime in a place where the occupant may have a firearm. If an individual has studied their new firearm, is familiar with its function, and has practiced at least once or twice, then total self-defense is a simple matter." I kind of think that paragraph there is absolute bunk, if you will. Someone new to firearms who goes out, they purchase a firearm, they practice with said firearm once or twice. I mean, I really just do not see this person as being having total self-defense being a simple matter for them. I don't know how well I could fire under stress if something were to go bump in the night, and I try to make it to the range at least once a month. I try to get there every couple of weeks. And even then, even range trips, at my leisure, I still can't replicate that adrenaline dump of a really bad situation. I mean, I can get an increased adrenaline rush by doing a USPSA match because I'm competing against the clock. However, when I go out there and I shoot USPSA, now granted I've only done it once so far, but I plan to do it much, much more. When the buzzer goes off, I'm not shaky or anything like that from just my system being slammed with adrenaline, fear, worry, concern. I mean, many people say that all that goes out the window and you act instinctively in a self-defense situation. But I gotta think that, that total fear and being able to get that gun on target and manipulate it and fire the weapon responsibly or well, and getting good shot placement is going to be extremely difficult for someone who's only practiced with their gun once or twice and is simply familiar with the function. I think training is very important. Situational awareness is very important. If we're talking about simply when the scenario when things go bump in the night and those murderous drug lords come bashing in your door from the outside, the gun is a definite equalizer. It helps if you can get to it in time, if it's loaded and ready to go. However, I still wonder how capable a new person is with 1 or 2 range trips under their belt. I mean, you don't want to give anyone the false sense of security. You definitely need to practice with your firearms and become proficient with them. And even then, I still don't think there is such a thing as total self-defense. And especially, I wouldn't say that total self-defense is a simple matter. I mean, it's there's a lot that goes into it, and it's a really sticky, complicated subject to be saying that it is a simple matter. If you've got a gun, you know how it operates, and you've practiced with it once or twice. I think it takes dedication and a lot of commitment to be able to get anywhere near having total quote-unquote self-defense, or the total being in the quotes. I botched that a little bit. But that was the second news article. I've got one more for you. My cigar is probably out again. When I read these news articles, I need to figure strategic places to puff on my cigar where there's a definite break. But then when I try to do that, there's like this long, awkward pause, and I feel it feels awkward for me sitting here with the camera rolling. I'm sure it's even more awkward for you sitting there waiting for me to say something as I'm puffing on my cigar. It doesn't help matters that the draw is a bit stiff and I'm not getting a whole lot of smoke, or no, I'm not getting enough. Now, this last article really grabbed my attention, and I wanted to stand up and cheer when I read this, because I really wish we had something like this in Pennsylvania. Now, this article comes from the Orlando Sentinel, and it is written by Martin E. Comas. And this was published on August 13th, 2011. Excuse me. The article is entitled Florida Cities, Counties Must Take Local Gun Laws Off Books. And here we go. Orange County employees have started removing quote-unquote no firearms signs at county parks, and soon they'll probably black out the same words on brochures. In Groveland, leaders recently erased from the books an ordinance that banned firing a gun into the air. Across Florida, similar scenes are being played out as cities and counties scour their ordinances to get rid of gun regulations by October 1st. That's when a tough new state law, backed by National Rifle Association, will forbid city and county governments from enacting or enforcing local gun control regulations. Local officials face individual $5,000 fines and even removal from office by the governor if they try to adopt or enforce local gun laws. These sanctions are rather draconian, said Robert Guthrie, Orange's senior assistant county attorney. We're doing a complete inventory of which rules and regulations we need to repeal. Since 1987, Florida has had a law giving the state the exclusive right to regulate firearms, but there were no penalties for local governments that took regulation a step further. The newly amended law adds teeth, Rebecca O'Hare, legislative director of Florida League of Cities, says. Supporters of the law, signed in June by Governor Rick Scott, contend that it was needed to have consistent firearm regulations across Florida. By doing away with the local restrictions, it allows people with state-issued concealed weapons permits to carry firearms in places where they should have been allowed all along, according to the NRA. That includes, for example, Orange County parks, which have had a no-guns policy. The Constitution protects the right to keep and bear arms, said Marion Hammer, lobbyist for the NRA. Local governments are not allowed to regulate the Bill of Rights. But Dennis Hennigan, interim president of the Brady Campaign to Prevent Gun Violence, a gun control advocacy group in Washington, lambasted the law, calling it shameful. The gun lobby is determined to force guns into every corner of our society, Hennigan said. That does not make us safer. Nevertheless, local governments from Miami to Pensacola are purging their ordinances of gun references. In Boca Raton, the No Guns Allowed sign has come down at City Hall. In Lake County, commissioners recently deleted a provision in an ordinance that would have banned firearms on public land, including parks. In Orange, Matt Swedemeyer, the county's Parks and Recreation manager, said that he has had several meetings with county attorneys to discuss the law, and it does appear that we have to remove any signs referring guns. To save money, county employees probably will use markers to block out wording about guns in brochures. There is little concern about public safety, Swedemeyer said. The bad guys that carry guns will bring them into parks regardless. State law already makes it illegal to fire into buildings, cars, across streets, and in public places, except for self-defense. Though concealed weapons permit holders will be allowed to bring guns into most government buildings, state law does not allow firearms in meetings of elected officials. But a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't work for gun regulations, Palm Beach County Commissioner Shelley Vanna said. Urban communities with more people living closer together should be able to have stricter gun rules and than rural communities with more wide open spaces, Vanna said. It is a shame that there are people in Florida who love their guns more than children, Vanna said. Special interests have won out. But Hammer, of the NRA, said local gun haters flouting the 1987 law for years prompted the addition of personal penalties for public officials who try to impose local rules. Deferring gun regulations across the state made criminals out of law-abiding people who had no way of knowing what these local gun regulations were, she said. So, very interesting article. This is fantastic for Florida. I really wish we could get something like this going in Pennsylvania. And the reason I say that is we have just a lot of preemption violation problems with local municipalities and small towns. And we actually have a lot of trouble with Philadelphia as well. The state says, here are your guidelines on guns, and then we have these people that are down below the state level saying, okay, and in our municipality, you're not allowed to carry a gun here, or you're not allowed to do this with a gun, you're not allowed to do that. And it makes it very difficult to find consistency from one municipality to the other. So if I get in my car and I leave Berks County and I drive, through Reading, down into Pottstown in Montgomery County, I could be looking at several different laws along the way. Now, chances of me having a problem driving from one place to the other isn't really an issue. It's not in my vehicle and another county doesn't. However, some municipalities say that you're not allowed to have guns in local parks and things like that, which violates the state's rulings stating that you can. And there was even an issue recently where I was reading this forum, and there was a guy that came across a preemption violation, and he contacted the local municipality about it. And he says, look, I came across this sign. It said no guns allowed in the park, and I just wanted to bring this to your attention because it violates state law, and there could be a civil case involved, in the event that anyone ever was arrested in the park for this or charged with having a gun in the park, because again, it violates the state law. And he sent the letter to the municipality, and they addressed it in a public meeting, and the public meeting was aired on television on one of these local stations. Well, and in the meeting, I hear that they're joking around. There's lots of references to one of the people at the meeting saying, we're in no rush for this. If it doesn't get done until 2012, it's no big deal. And then someone else commented, yeah, if it doesn't get done until 2016, it's no big deal. So they were kind of blowing it off and making light of the subject. And this person contacted them again. I think he may have contacted them again a little more stern in the second email, and he got a response stating, well, our decision is this: we haven't enacted this, we haven't charged anyone with this ordinance, and we don't plan on charging anyone with this ordinance. It's kind of the way it's going to stay. We're not going to do anything about it. We're just going to leave well enough alone. And quite frankly, that's just not good enough. When you get someone that's just got a bug up their butt and they decide to charge someone with having a gun in the park, then the municipality could be in a lot of trouble, in a civil manner. Arresting someone that was well within their rights of having a firearm, and they get arrested for having a firearm, or they get their firearm confiscated, or whatever the case may be. And then you've got Philadelphia enacting their own gun laws, where they're trying to push a one gun a month law, which really doesn't do anything, as far as I'm concerned, for the people that are on the legal side of things. They also pushed a lost or stolen ordinance, which I think went into effect. I don't know if anyone's ever been charged with anything for it, but the NRA is constantly fighting there to get these things overturned and thrown out, because the state has the final say, not the city. Just because you have a very large population and you're in a condensed urban area, like in the article, I don't think it makes your self-defense any more worthwhile or less important than me living in a rural area. Self-defense is self-defense. Just because there are more people around, that shouldn't really change that. But that's just my opinion on the subject. But definitely a very interesting article. Something I stand behind. I really like this, and again, I really wish we had something like this in Pennsylvania. Putting a personal responsibility on the person that enacted the law is really how to get the job done. They're gonna, where before, for example, Mayor Nutter in Philadelphia could pass these laws, and he's not liable for anything. It's the city that's got to fork over the money if there's a big civil suit. So, again, interesting article. Now that wraps up the news, and generally from here I go into featured content. However, you know what? I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a quick break, try to get my cigar burning properly, and I'll be back. We'll take a look at some featured content, and then we'll move the show right along. Well, I got my cigar lit, wet my pout a little bit, and wet my whistle a little bit, and I think I'm ready to get rolling with featured content. So let's take a lighter look at things and check out some of the things that I came across the web. Now, much like news, I rely very heavily on Google Reader to get my gun information. And I follow a variety of blogs and podcasts and video streams and things like that, and it all gets dumped into Google Reader, and I like to go through there, and these are just 3 articles that I picked out. Itching my nose. But these are 3 articles that I picked out that I thought I would feature. So the first one comes from Caleb Giddings, excuse me, over at Gun Nuts Media, and he has a series where he interviews the contestants from Top Shot, which were eliminated. Now, he's been doing it, I believe, I know he did it all of last season because I listened to a lot of those. But the first episode of Top Shots with someone being eliminated was just recent. I'm not going to tell you who was eliminated, just in case you haven't seen it yet. I didn't want to ruin it for you because I didn't actually watch the episode. I didn't watch the end of the episode for quite a while. It was the first time I was actually sitting down in front of the TV when it came on, and I didn't make it through the whole episode. I was getting tired, and I didn't find out who was eliminated until like the following week when I caught a rerun or something like that. But Caleb interviews the people that were eliminated, and it's a really interesting insight into what's going on at the ranch. Some of the stuff that doesn't make it to film. But so the person that's eliminated calls in to Caleb Giddings' Gun Nuts Media or Gun Nuts Radio, and they get to talking. And it was really interesting because if you saw this episode, what they did was they took the team, I think it's 16 contestants in all, and they paired them off, and each of them fired a Smith & Wesson 500 at 3 targets. I think it was like 25, 50, and 75 yards, or 25, 50, and 75 feet. The first person to explode all of the 3 exploding targets won. They go sit down on one bench, the loser sits down on another bench, and they go through all of the contestants. Now, it's kind of interesting because they're matching up people sort of. They matched up 2 women because they were women, and that just seemed kind of strange. They matched up some of the self-taught shooters against themselves. They seem to match up, people that receive government training together. And what ends up happening is you get one group of people that have all won the competition, and you've got one group of people that all have lost the competition. And then the host, I can't think of his name, he breaks out the jerseys and says, "Okay, you winners, you are blue team. You losers, you are red team." And my jaw almost hit the floor when I saw that. Talk about mental mind games and really setting the tone. I mean, you just mentally body slammed the losing team, and you've just marked them the losers for the remainder of the season. And I've got to think that's got to be really tough to come back from. Well, the contestant that was eliminated more or less said the same thing. The mental mind games from the winning team or from the blue team, it started immediately, and it felt like they were starting buried in a hole, and they had to dig their way out, and it was really difficult. And some of the things that were talked about in the episode were really interesting, because I was under the impression that apparently like all of the shooting was done on one day, or everything that you saw was pretty condensed into a day or two. Well, it turns out it's actually like 3 days, and it's really spread out, and there's a lot going on, and a lot is edited out. And there was some insight as to what was edited out and some of the interesting things that were going on in the house, and they took the liberty of like bleeping the females just for no reason, and the guys that were dropping the F-bombs constantly didn't get bleeped at all because all of that stuff was edited out. So it made the women sound like the quote-unquote potty mouths of the episode, and it was kind of interesting, back and forth, everything that was going on. And I really enjoyed listening to the interview. In the past, some of them have been hit or miss, but this one, this season from Caleb starts out really strong, and I'm really interested to follow along and see which contestants get eliminated and what they have to say about Top Shot in general, as things move along. Who did they like, who did they dislike, what was going on behind the scenes, just really interesting stuff. So if you have, I don't remember how long the episode is. I think it may be about an hour. If you've got an hour, head over to Gun Nuts. Not now. Finish watching my podcast, then go over there. But definitely check out what Caleb has produced. It's really interesting. Now, the next featured content is actually, it's not really a featured article or podcast or video or anything like that. It was a question posed by a blogger. Now, the blog is one that I'm not really familiar with. I just recently added it to my RSS reader, and it is The Truth About Guns. It seems very active. I get multiple updates throughout the day. It seems to get lots of comments. It seems to be a very popular blog. It's well written. It's very interesting. And basically, this article was just entitled "Question of the Day: Is .380 a suitable self-defense caliber?" And inside the article, or inside this little write-up, he makes mention of the Applebee's shooting that I talked about last episode, where a guy and his girlfriend get out of the car, and the woman is approached by a mugger. The boyfriend comes around the car, sees a gun being pointed at his girlfriend, draws his own weapon, which is chambered in .380, and fires 4 rounds into the bad guy. The bad guy goes down. He's his brain is working. He's not like laid out dead or anything. He's capable of pulling the mask off of his head. He's wearing a ski mask, and he pleads for his life. He says, "Please don't shoot me anymore." So, when I read that article last week, I was a little concerned because I started carrying a .380 pocket pistol in the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard. Now, generally, I carry a .40 Smith & Wesson Springfield XD. But there are times when it's just a little too big for certain situations. And if I have to run out for a minute, it's just easier to take that Bodyguard in a little pocket holster, toss it in my pocket, and head out the door. Whereas, when I go to strap on the Crossbreed, it's, I've got to unbuckle my pants, and I got to fit it in there without my pants falling down, and I got to get the belt cinched in and make sure it's covered well. Well, it's not really that big a deal, but it is more involved than simply slipping a pocket pistol into my pocket. So when I need to be a little more discreet, I carry this .380. And when I read the article about Applebee's, I was kind of concerned a little bit, thinking, is it enough? Because when I finally decided to buy a pocket pistol, I totally dismissed the .380 isn't big enough concept. And I said, the chips fall where they fall. I've got friends that carry .32. I've got a friend that carries a .25 ACP. It's about shot placement and the bad guy, the foe. Is he hopped up on methamphetamine? Is he drunk? What is his mental state altered by some sort of drug? All of this is going to play a part into how many shots he can take and whether or not he goes down with the first shot, regardless of whether it's a .22 or a Smith & Wesson 500. But a couple of weeks ago, I was listening to a ProArms podcast where there was a police officer was being interviewed, and I believe he had mentioned that there was, in the shootout that he was involved in, there was a bad guy that the only thing in his system was a little bit of alcohol, but he was really determined to hurt people. And I think he took in excess of 10 rounds, varying in caliber from 9mm all the way up to 44 special, or 44 mag. So, I guess it really depends on the determination of the bad guy. And now all of the meat and potatoes of this article were in the comments section. There was a lot of back and forth and interesting things brought up here and there about how the 380 doesn't meet the FBI testing for penetration and things like that. And it's understandable, but I guess it's just something you give up for convenience. Being able to toss the pistol in my pocket, it was something that I gave up. And I'm okay with. I'm comfortable carrying it. But there was just that little bit of doubt nagging in the back of my mind when I read that Applebee's article. And this article from The Truth About Guns, which really is an article, it's just a question with lots of comments, was really interesting. You should definitely check it out if you get the opportunity. Alright, now the last featured item is going to be a podcast that I recently listened to live, and that is the Barstool Discussion, episode 25 from the Gun Rights Radio Network. Now, I was debating on whether or not to use this as featured content because it's kind of like a mixed bag. It's about firearms, but there's some tech stuff mixed in, there's booze mixed in, there's talk of adult beverages and things like that. And guns is sort of the central topic, but it really changes throughout the show. Now this episode was the first one that I've ever gotten to listen to live, and I really had to force myself to do it. Not because the show isn't good enough to listen to live or anything, it's just because it starts at 9 p.m. on a Wednesday evening every other week. Now, I get up at 4:30 in the morning, so it's really difficult for me to keep my eyes open past 9:30, 10 o'clock. It's a 2-hour show. It starts at 9. It ends at 11. However, the recording ends at 11, but the show goes on. And I've heard stories of it going on for much, much longer. And, the discussion gets lively, and it gets interesting as the show goes longer. And I think I listened till about 10:30, and I just couldn't keep my eyes open any longer. I went to bed. But I had a great time listening to what Doc Wesson and Mark Vanderberg had to say on various topics. And the chat room was a fantastic addition to all this, because as Doc and Mark are talking about things, the chat room is building on them. So Doc mentions a certain gun incident, and you get people in the comments section building on that. Okay, I remember that happening. I had a store downtown when the riots broke out. It was, I was there. It was a scary situation, and you've got the people in the chat room building on this as they go along. And it was really interesting being able to sort of chime in little bits and pieces of information as they went along, because they're actively looking at the chat, and anything of interest they're dumping right back into the show, and it becomes this big collaborative effort, and it works out to be really interesting and a lot of fun. So while it's not really gun heavy, I mean, it is gun heavy, but while it's not all about guns, there's plenty of guns, and then there's a variety of other topics that are mixed in, which also interest me. Tech stuff, booze. I think cigars came up once or twice, but it's definitely a cool show. I've recently started burning podcasts to disc, and I listen to them in my car during my commute. Now, I don't have a very long commute, and I'm happy to say my commute round trip is probably 20 miles a day, so I spend very little time in the car. But for those short trips, throughout a week, I may get through maybe 3 episodes of a given show. And what I've been doing for these podcast discs is I burn data discs and I play them in my car. Now, generally I'll take like 5 episodes of Gun Dudes because I'm trying to work my way back through all of them. And I recently dumped 5 episodes of the Barstool Discussion on the disc. Now, I just finished listening to the last episode. I need to burn another disc, but I don't know how many actual hours it turned out to be, because some of the earlier ones were like 3 hours long. The newer episodes are 2 hours long, but I'm really enjoying the show. I don't enjoy it as much as Gun Dudes, but it's definitely a supplement to my gun content, and I really do enjoy listening to it. And I would definitely suggest checking it out if you're awake at 9 p.m. Eastern on a Wednesday every other week. You should definitely check it out and listen live. The hi-fi stream is is done quite well. It doesn't sound like AM radio or anything, and well done. Really enjoyed it. And that covers all of the featured topics. And I'm getting kind of parched. Doing a lot of talking, smoking, and drinking, so it's getting tough. It's paying its toll, or taking its toll. But we're getting there. We're getting through the show. Now, I wanted to somehow work in a range report to this podcast, and I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to do it. In the last episode, or the first episode, I did a rather long introduction telling you who I was, where I was from, my experience with guns, my experience with cigars, things like that. And it really limited my time later on. And somewhere I wanted to mix in a range report, just because I thought it would be interesting, and I kind of want to talk about some of the things I've done in guns in between shows. And I haven't done anything since that last podcast. This past weekend I was away doing some family stuff, and I didn't get out to the range at all. And I don't typically go to the range during the week. I just don't really have the time. The weekends are the time where I'm free and I get to go. But as I said, this weekend I was busy. But the last range trip I made was to shoot my new Smith & Wesson Bodyguard that I mentioned earlier, the 380. And I had a lot of fun. I mean, I only took 24 rounds to the range. I knew I had some 380 in a box in my range bag. I didn't know how much was there, and I didn't bother checking before I walked out the door. So I left, I get to the range, I open up the box, and I've only got 24 rounds. If I'd have known that, I'd have ran over to Walmart and stocked up a little bit before I headed over the range. But I put 24 rounds through the Bodyguard, and I was amazed by how light the recoil was. I mean, I have a big, heavy Beretta Model 70S. It's just heavy, but it's really violent. And it's much heavier than the Bodyguard, so I was expecting just extreme recoil out of this thing. I mean, I'm not recoil shy or anything, but I really expected to struggle with the recoil of this tiny little polymer gun. Well, it turns out the recoil is not bad at all, and it shoots great. I had a blast with it up close at about 7 yards. I mean, it's awesome. You get out to about 20 yards, and your groups get all kinds of big, or at least they did for me. I can't see the laser out that far, but again, it's a pocket pistol not meant for that kind of distance. So, you know, I see those larger groups out at 20, 25 yards as being acceptable. It's a close range gun, and I think it does a really good job, you know, in those close quarter situations. And I can't wait to get out and shoot it some more. While I was there, I also popped off about 50 rounds of 9mm through my Smith & Wesson M&P just to keep knock the rust off, I guess. It's been a few weeks since I've had it out to shoot it, and I just got out there and started shooting it and had fun. It was kind of funny because I picked it up after shooting the Smith & Wesson Bodyguard. Now, the Bodyguard has a long, heavy double-action trigger. I think it's about 12 pounds, and it's like miles long, it feels. And when I drew the M&P, I got the sights on target, I touched the trigger, and then I was I don't know, a mental lapse, I guess. I'm thinking that same long, heavy pull, but it seemed like just as soon as I touched that trigger, the gun went off. I mean, it was pointed in a safe direction. I had this clear sight picture. I knew what I was aiming at, but it was a total surprise when it went off, and I had to adjust to that. I think it's like 6 pounds of trigger pull. I had to adjust to that after the long, heavy Bodyguard trigger pull, and it was difficult, but kind of cool to see the two extremes, you know, the lighter trigger pull versus the heavy long double action long pull. But that is my range report, and glancing up at the clock, I don't have nearly as much time as I thought I did. So with that said, I'm going to take another break, touch up my cigar again, and take a couple of sips of water to wet my whistle a little bit, and then I'll be back and we'll talk a little bit more. Well, it's time for segment 3, in which case I talk about the cigar and the drink pairing that I'm enjoying during the show, during the podcast. And the cigar is one that you really can't get anymore. I mean, there have been releases, and some of them are still available. However, this is a 2009 release of the Oliva Serie V Maduro. Now, when this cigar came out in 2009, it was, and probably still is, one of my favorite cigars. It's got a very bold flavor. It's got the Maduro tones that the Oliva Serie V, well, didn't have because it wasn't a Maduro, but the original Serie V had sort of a spicy quality that's replaced by more of a sort of a bitter kind of a taste. It's nice and full-bodied, coats the palate really well. I have a lot of difficulty with Oliva torpedoes for whatever reason, or Bellicosos. The tapered shape, they seem overly tight at the head, and the draw is always restricted. I end up cutting a ton of cigar off, but even with a restricted draw, it's still worth it. I mean, I love these things. They just have lots of flavor, lots of body, lots of depth and richness, and they are just fantastic with something like a Samuel Smith's Oatmeal Stout. I love Maduros and Stout or Porter, and I didn't have any of the Samuel Smith's Oatmeal Stout, but I did have a little bit of Glenlivet, which I decided to pair it with tonight. It's going fairly well. It's not matched ideally. I mean, in a perfect world, I'd have a Samuel Smith's Oatmeal Stout right now to go with this, but the Glenlivet and Glenfiddich, I kind of, not to throw a negative connotation out there, but I kind of see them as kind of like the Budweiser of Scotch. They seem to be blended for the everyman. You know, they don't have really aggressive flavors. They're not over the top. They're fairly light flavored. I like them. They have a mild, sort of a fruity kind of a taste to them. And if you throw an ice cube or two inside that Scotch, I mean, there's a bit of a bitiness that it goes away instantly when it gets chilled. I prefer Scotch neat. I like a lot of rum on the rocks. I like a lot of bourbon on the rocks as well. But Scotch, for whatever reason, I just prefer it neat. It's not my favorite Scotch. My favorite at the moment would be Macallan 12-year, but the Glenfiddich 12-year is a very nice lighter Scotch, and it pairs well with a lot of cigars. You know, because it doesn't have big, heavy, bold flavors, it doesn't overwhelm a lot of cigars. And because it has enough flavor to stand on its own, a lot of cigars don't overpower it. So it's kind of like it's kind of one of those drink pairings that just work with a lot of different things. It's kind of universal. So the pairing is working out, although I'd really like to have an oatmeal stout right now. So that is your podcast, cigar, and beverage pairing for this evening, or for this episode. Now, I was going to jump into a question that I got from a viewer. However, I'm glancing up at the timer, and I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time. So I'm going to push that question to the end. If I have enough time, I'll cover it. If not, I'll cover it in the next show, because I want to get to the featured topic. Now, the featured topic is just something that I saw that I wanted to talk about. I had something on my mind about. Now, as I was browsing Facebook the other day, I saw a photo come across from the Smith & Wesson page. Now, a while back, I quote-unquote liked the Smith & Wesson page, so I get all kinds of updates when things are going on. And one of the things that really catch my eye was this new photo of the Smith & Wesson M&P 22. Now, it's a 22 long rifle version of the popular Smith & Wesson M&P platform, the pistol. And when I saw the picture of this, I may have giggled like a little schoolgirl and got all excited for it. I don't generally cover SHOT Show. I don't watch SHOT Show coverage. It's not like the annual IPCPR trade show for cigars where I'm like glued to the set or glued to the computer seeing what's going on if I'm not there. This year I didn't go, but SHOT Show is something that I follow just by checking out the various blogs and seeing what they're posting, but I don't actively watch for SHOT Show specific information. So I missed the information on the Smith & Wesson M&P 22. Now, when I saw the pictures, I immediately had to go running out to YouTube and try to find video footage on it, and sure enough, I did. And when I saw the video, I wasn't nearly as excited. I mean, I'm still excited about it, but not nearly as much. And the reason being, the 22, it looks a lot like the standard Smith & Wesson M&P, but it's kind of not. Now, one of the big differences that I saw in the video was the guy asking questions said, hey, can I pop the sights out and put, upgraded night sights on the M&P 22 to match my Smith & Wesson M&P, my carry gun? And the rep says, no. I mean, I guess you could, but you'd probably tear up the slide because it's aluminum versus steel in the M&P, so you don't want to go hammering steel sights in there. And that was kind of a downside, because immediately I'm thinking, well, okay, the slide is much, much lighter than the one on my M&P, so is it going to have the same balance? So I looked up the weight. Sure enough, the two guns weigh the same because the 22 doesn't have a polymer frame. It's some sort of alloy. And they're able to get the weight to match. It's 24 ounces for the M&P 9mm and the 22. So I thought, okay, that's cool that they weigh the same. They are the same shape, form factor. The holster for my 9mm will work with the 22. I'll be able to basically have a mimic weapon to take to the range to practice with at a much lower cost with 22 ammunition. But the more I was reading into it, the more I was kind of about it. Because the frame is alloy on the 22, it doesn't have replaceable back straps. It's sort of molded to match the medium back strap on the 9mm or the 40 or 45. But immediately that brought the concern, well, what if I were using the small back strap or the large back strap? Now the frame would feel different in my hand. I use the medium back strap, so it conveniently works out for me. However, if you're not using the medium back strap, there's some variation there. The gun could feel different in your hand. In addition to that, the 22 is going to be hammer fired, not striker fired like the 9mm. So I don't know if that's going to do anything to the trigger in the way it behaves, in the sense that, am I going to be able to practice with a duplicate weapon only in 22? Now I realize that it's not going to be exact because the recoil is going to be way different in the 22, but for practicing fundamentals like getting the gun out of the holster mounted, getting a clear sight picture and pressing the trigger, everything up to the actual gun firing and feeling recoil should be pretty similar, I'm hoping. Now, the price point was a little disappointing because it looks like the MSRP from Smith & Wesson is going to be about $419. That seems really high for a 22. I mean, it's outside of my comfort zone. I would like to see this gun at around the $300 mark, and if it were priced at $300, I'd run out and buy one as soon as I had the cash to get one, because I really see this as something that I could use as like supplemental practice to save a lot of money. I mean, with that 22 setup, I could shoot steel matches in addition to USPSA. Well, I'd be using the 9mm in USPSA, but I could also get into steel matches and use a gun that operates very much the same way as my USPSA setup. However, steel allows me to shoot 22. I could shoot from the holster. It would save me a lot of money, and it just sounds like a great plinking gun. A lot of the dimensions seem the same. The sight pictures, the length or the sight radius seems a little bit different on the 22, but all in all, I'm really excited about this gun, but I want to get it in my hands and handle it a little bit to see, how it works and how it feels in the hand and compared to my 9mm, because I want as close a match as I can get without actually firing 9mm. Now, granted, 9mm is not nearly as expensive as 40 or 45, but it adds up when you're shooting a couple hundred rounds. And if I could go to steel matches and shoot with a 22 that mimics my 9, that's a win-win. That's fantastic. I would definitely get to the range more often and shoot more often because I have a 22 that again mimics my 9. So really excited about it. I want to get to a gun shop and handle it. I don't know when they're shipping or what the actual price point would be. I mean, Smith & Wesson MSRP seems high always, and then you get to the gun shop and it's lower. At least in my area, it's always lower. And so, that $419 may come down considerably, but I'm really eager to get to a gun shop that has one and handle it. Because, again, if it's close enough to my 9, I'm going to buy one. It's the next gun on my list. I've wanted a 22 for a while, and here I wanted another 22 for a while, and here we have one that's awesome because it matches my 9 again. And I'm not aware of any 22 conversion kits for the M&P, unlike the Glock, which I mean, in 10 years you could probably get like a phaser accessory to make your Glock into a phaser, because they just make accessories, all kinds of accessories for Glocks and Ruger 1022s and a lot of the other popular firearms. Where you have a lot of accessories for the M&P, you don't have nearly as many as you do for Glock. So I haven't seen any conversion kits to convert my 9 to 22. So here is the alternative, as long as it's not incredibly expensive. But it looks like, glancing at the timer, I really don't have enough time to go over this question that I got, so I'm going to have to cover it next time around. I want to thank you for sitting through this episode. It's going to be about 50 minutes. I would imagine, after editing. And if you've sat through this long, thumbs up to you. You're awesome. And pat yourself on the back. I really appreciate it. Thank you for sitting through all of this. And I'm really looking forward to seeing your comments in the comment section down below on my blog, waltonpa.com. And I hope we can talk a little bit. We can, maybe you can pitch some ideas around, give me a little constructive criticism. We'll add some things into the show, take some things out based on popular demand, and maybe we can get this thing, I don't know, polished into more of a formal podcast. I mentioned in the last episode that I was probably going to do this bi-weekly. However, this episode is coming out a week after the first one, and it was I did it for no other reason than I just felt like sitting down and doing the podcast. I had a lot of fun doing the last one, and I had fun doing this one as well. So I just got done mowing the lawn. I was kind of run down, and I just wanted to come down and have a cigar and a drink, and I thought, why not just fire up the camera and do one of these episodes? So I did. I'm not quite sure whether I'm going to be able to keep the 1 week schedule. I would imagine I would count on going forward seeing this as a bi-weekly thing, unless I just kind of get the urge to sit down and do a recording, in which case you'll get one a week. But those could be few and far between. Just count on them every other week. I don't want to schedule this one for 2 weeks out, just because I did it and I don't want to have to wait that long to post it. I want that instant gratification of getting comments on the podcast. So again, thank you for watching, and until next time, happy shooting, happy smoking, and happy drinking, and I will catch you later.